Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, good morning. Happy Saturday to everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mrs. R Relevant. I am joined with Anthony and Brian, and we're going to kind of chat about the quarterback off-season, but we're going to more focus on free agent and trade targets as opposed to draft targets. But before we do that, good morning, Brian. How are things on the West Coast?
Not bad. A little chilly, but not bad.
You look like you have sun. I'm like looking at the window and think you have more sun than I do in Ohio.
No, it's a light. I got a light behind the camera here. so I don't look too dark.
Cool. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning. It is very chilly here, but we're hanging in.
So this is actually one of my favorite things is to see all the snow melt. So we've been under snow here in Ohio for, I will say, the better part of 7 to 10 days. But it has gotten above freezing. The roads are soaking wet. The driveway is soaking wet because all the snow is melting to the street. So it's a good feeling. Simple things make me happy. What can I say?
Same.
But we're going to kind of pivot to talk about quarterbacks and what the quarterback off-season looks like. So, Brian, who do you think is the best name if a team needs to find a quarterback this year?
It's pretty slim pickings this year, but probably the best guy out there, I would say, is probably Sam Darnold from Minnesota.
And that's a free agent acquisition, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, Anthony, what are your thoughts on Darnold? Like, what kind of contract?
Yeah, well, so Darnold's it's tough. It's tough because I don't think Minnesota should and will let him out of the building. I think he's been too good, and obviously you're going to think to the last 2 games of the season, which were just horrible for Vikings fans. But they won 14 games. He played the best football of his career. Finally, he's in a good starting situation. If you're Minnesota, I don't think you risk letting him walk, as much as I do think J.J. McCarthy, who's another option here, is still a very talented player. I think their best bet is keeping Darnold. Now, that said, if they do let Darnold walk, I think you're looking at a contract in the Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield range, sort of that 30 to 40 mil probably. If Darnold asks for more than that, I would not be interested because I don't think he's done that exceptionally well as a starter. But I do think I think of all the quarterbacks that are available in free agency / trade situations, I do think Darnold is the most proven out of this point of people that played this year consistently. Darnold had the best season, but I just don't see the world Minnesota lets him go.
See, and that's interesting because, I mean, I've gone back and forth on Darnold, McCarthy, Minnesota probably 5 or 10 times this offseason. So you can definitely find tweets that I've made from one or other of my accounts where I said they should keep Darnold, trade JJ. The Vikings should no longer trade JJ. I'm out of that mindset. But you can find tweets where I definitely suggested they trade JJ. I don't agree with that stance anymore. But whether or not they keep Darnold, like if they either franchise, like I don't know that Darnold would sign a 1-year deal with Minnesota.
No.
I don't. At this point, I think he's looking for a long-term deal. I do think the other thing this is kind of contingent on is what is McCarthy's health at this point? How is his knee right now? Right, because if the Vikings feel that by training camp McCarthy can step in and look exactly how he looked in this past preseason, then maybe they are a little more willing to maybe potentially let Darnold walk. But again, I would rather you keep Darnold, continue to, I mean, he's only 27. It's not like he's, on the wrong side of 30. He is still young. You can still develop him. Kevin O'Connell clearly seems to have an affinity for him. So if you continue to grow him while also having a younger, potentially higher ceiling option in McCarthy, but who can still sit and learn, which is something I think we all kind of thought is like McCarthy should sit and learn and shouldn't start right away. But I would rather have two quarterback options that I could be hopeful for in the future rather than lose one and then find out one actually wasn't as good as I thought he would be.
I think there's merit to that. I think the issue is, do we think Minnesota's window is right now?
Yeah, it kind of is.
I think they're entering it. Like I don't think this is like, obviously, like I don't think this season is it. But yeah, you're probably looking at like the next, 2-3 seasons is like that. This is the window.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, like, as far as their window, because they have a couple guys that are getting a little bit older. Smith, their safety, he's like 34, 35, something. So he's getting near retirement, getting near the end of the line. A couple other guys a little bit older. But they do have some younger guys, of course, like, the receivers and whatnot. And then Aaron Jones, of course, the free agent, he's always dinged up. And so that's always a question. And he's getting older too. The only thing I would say is do a little bit of pushback on as far as about Sam Darnold not getting out of the building or whatever with Minnesota. Just because I think, he's, like you said, he's 27, but he's going to be 28. I think it's in May or something like that. So before the season, he's already going to be 28. And so this is going to be basically his last and only chance at a big contract, get like as much money as he can, as many years as he can, guaranteed money and all that stuff. So I think he's going to want, 4 or 5 year deal, whatever it is, because he's going to want to cash in because he knows the next contract is going to be nothing compared to it. And I don't see Minnesota giving him a 4-year contract, $30 million, $40 million a year, whatever. So I think honestly, he's probably gone. Whether they do like a sign and trade or something, maybe they'd work that out. Maybe they tag him and then trade him, get at least something for him. But I honestly kind of see the opposite way, where I don't think there's any way he's back in Minnesota unless just something really weird happens or something, or he gets injured in the offseason, or just, like I said, something weird happens. But I don't see any way he's back.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't remember which one of you had the concept, but I think it was Anthony, where you said Minnesota should go into the season with 2 choices, because even if you're betting on McCarthy, you don't know about the injury right now. So Minnesota's likely going to need another option in the building. I also agree with Brian that Darnold knows this is his payday. He's not going to take a 1-year deal or even a short deal. He's going to go for the max guaranteed money. And I believe he thinks this is his peak value. So even with the playoffs, because I think the playoffs likely cost Darnold about $10 million a year. Right? He didn't necessarily play that well at the end of the season. So,
yeah, but I think teams will look at the season as a whole and they'll be like, well, he just had a couple of bad games. Maybe it was not his fault, or it's just had a bad game or something like that. So,
and I don't know how much, like, even if JJ McCarthy was playing and healthy, I don't know if the outcomes of either of those games really changed that drastically. There were issues. The offensive line did not play great. There were other issues. So I don't totally put in on Darnold. I mean, yeah, it probably didn't help his negotiations, but I think either way, unless Minnesota like made the Super Bowl, I think we were looking at like a 35-40-ish per year range.
Right. So I think I would agree that Sam Darnold is probably QB1 in the offseason class. So, Anthony, who would be the next quarterback that you'd want to think about, like, as if your team needs a starter?
Yeah, this is, as Brian said, this is really slim pickings. I think the next sort of situation I monitor is Justin Fields, and that's probably going to get pushed back from some people, but I do think Justin Fields played well this season before he was obviously then benched and Russell Wilson came in. I think at this point, obviously the Steelers are out of the playoffs now, but I think there was a conversation to be had of potentially putting Fields back in the way that Russell Wilson was playing towards the end of the year. He had moments of greatness, and George Pickens was the Wilson to Pickens combination was solid, but Justin Fields looked better in the I forget how many games he played with Pittsburgh, but however many games he played with them, I think he looked better than most of his time in Chicago. Finally having a situation more tailored to him and his skill set. If you're a team that is looking for a dual threat sort of option, Justin Fields is another one. I mean, he's only 25, 24 at this point. He's still very young. There's still plenty of room for him to grow as a passer. If you're not sold on one of these quarterbacks in the draft, but you want a young quarterback that you could potentially develop and have sort of maybe a Darnold-esque renaissance with, I still think Justin Fields has a skill set that can work.
Yeah. So if I was a team and I was, let's say, I think I'm a playoff team if I have the right quarterback, right? I think Justin Fields, you can sign him as a free agent, so he's not under contract with Pittsburgh anymore. So I like that as a choice. You could draft one of these guys that's not Shedeur or Ward, put him behind Fields, and if you think you're a quarterback away from the playoffs, Fields with a rookie, you can sign Fields as a free agent, draft a rookie on day 2. You're positioning yourself to see if Fields goes on a bender, you might make the playoffs, right? Because to me, like Colin Kaepernick would be a great example of he was a better runner than he was a thrower. And he really only had the 1 year where he took the 49ers to the Super Bowl. It's not like he had like a 3-year or 4-year peak set of performance. Like, to me, Kaepernick was really like I don't want to call him a one-hit wonder, but there was really only 1 year where he took the 49ers all the way. And I see Fields really similar to Kaepernick. But Brian, what do you think about a team that's signing Fields?
Yeah, I think he's an option. I just looked at him actually. He started 6 games this year for the Steelers. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, he's probably, I just had my list here. Where'd it go? He's probably the next best option. I mean, options. Yeah, it's not. I mean, because he's still got some youth to him. Of course, obviously, he's probably the most talented, at least physically, of the guys out there. Yeah, it just really depends on, because there's a few teams out there. It just depends on what these teams want to do. I mean, there's the Raiders, Seattle, Giants, Jets, Browns, Steelers, Titans are all probably in need of a quarterback. I was even thinking possibly even Miami, depending on what happens to Tua and his concussions. So yeah, it just depends on how they see him, and if even if one team wants to bring in Russell Wilson or something, they think maybe 1 year thing with Russell Wilson. I mean, it could go, but I think he's probably the second best guy of the free agents, though.
Yep.
Yeah, because at least he has some upside. There's some potential, maybe something there.
Okay.
I think the other thing with Fields too is we just talked about how Darnold's going to command 35, 40 million, however much. Justin Fields is not getting that kind of money. However, he's getting a 2 year. He's getting what Darnold has right now. Probably he's probably getting the 1 to 2 year, 10 mil at most deal, and that I think is also huge, because I have other guys on my list that we'll probably get to that are going to want more than that as well. So you get a cheap young guy with upside, and Jim, you kind of laid it out. Like, then you can go draft a day 2 or day 3, potential quarterback that you might like as a starter. I'd feel more comfortable. And then worst case, you go 2026. Your team stinks. You got a high draft pick, and you go find one next year. So I like Fields as an option.
So when I bring up a quarterback, they're going to be maybe a little bit more abstract. I'm just saying, I tend to think out of the box. So the next offseason quarterback, it would not surprise me to see him switch teams, even though he is under contract right now, is Matthew Stafford. So if a team thinks they are a quarterback away, and when Stafford was traded to the Rams, Sean McVay thought that they were a quarterback away, and my opinion is that he was right. But I can see Stafford getting moved. I think there's going to be rumors circling in the offseason about the Rams trading Stafford, but that assumes that the Rams might be, let's say, they could get Darnold and then draft somebody behind him or something. So if the Rams are trading Stafford, they have a plan to replace him, because to me, the Rams would just be trying to get younger. Mm-hmm. Right? How many more years can they get out of Stafford? But at the same time, this is Stafford. His trade value won't be higher than it is right now. So if they wanted to get something for him. But Brian, what do you think about Stafford?
I mean, the Rams do have a pretty young roster. They've kind of remade the roster a little bit with some of those recent draft picks last couple of years. It have to be a team that, again, kind of like what you said, it have to be a team that felt like they were like a quarterback away, quote unquote, from a Super Bowl or deep playoff run. But of the teams that need quarterbacks, I'm not sure. Maybe the Jets, because they at least there's talent there. It's just, I know, Anthony.
I get the sentiment. But...
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking of the teams that have quarterback needs. I mean, the Raiders aren't very good. Seattle's not very good. Giants are not very good. Maybe Browns, but they're still not that great.
No, I think Stafford to the Browns, if the cap situation could be solved, that's the kind of thing that I would be. First of all, I think if Stafford got traded, it would be to an AFC team. I don't think the Rams would trade him in the conference.
No.
Out of the AFC teams that need a quarterback, I think the Titans or the Colts are closer to the playoffs than anybody wants to admit. Part of it is the division that they play in. I am not the Texans are for real person. I think the Texans are definitely the best team in that division. But I think a team can go from worst to first in that division better than any other division in football, except maybe the NFC South. So, I definitely do agree, Brian. Finding the right place where Stafford would be traded to, I think is trickier than actually talking about trading Stafford.
And I think even the Steelers could be an option, just because they're still it's pretty talented roster. So maybe, especially if they get maybe another offensive lineman in there or something like that, because they still got some young offensive linemen. But I mean, yeah, I think they got some talent there. So maybe.
Do we think so if, let's just say the Raiders hire like a Ben Johnson, which is very possible.
Right.
They then trade for a Matt Stafford because they clearly need a quarterback. And then they go draft like Ashton Jeanty at 6. So now you have an offense with Ben Johnson as your coach, Matt Stafford as your quarterback, Ashton Jeanty as your running back. You probably need some receiver help. Jacoby Myers is fine. But Brock Bowers is just
Bowers.
just a sensation. Right.
Right.
And I don't think the defense is terrible. I don't think it's particularly great, but you still have Max Crosby, still have Malcolm Koonce. Like there's holes, but it's not a terrible defense. You're obviously playing in it's a hard division to deal with.
That's the point. Exactly.
That's obviously a problem. But I think immediately that team is a potential wild card team, I would say.
If things go right, yeah, I think that they probably need a little more help on the offensive line and stuff, and then yeah, so I think probably they'd be a threat for a wild card team, but
right. And SpotRack has the Raiders with $97 million of cap space.
Yeah, they have a lot.
Yeah, they could shore up a lot of issues in free agency too.
Yep. Okay, so Anthony I guess it's Brian's turn. So Brian, do you have another quarterback you want to add into the discussion?
Yeah, like we said, it's slim pickings. I mean, I think Jameis Winston is an option for somebody. Again, if they're looking for a bridge quarterback to start for a year ahead of a young rookie or first year player, second year player, whatever. Jameis Winston could do that because he's not the same player he was 3-4 years ago, but throw him in there for a year. He kind of just he'll throw some interceptions and stuff, of course, still, but he'll make some really nice throws, touchdowns, and all that. So I think he's a potential option, like I said, as like a 1-year bridge type quarterback.
So Anthony, what do you think of Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I think Jameis is the best option in terms of if we're doing like a specific category of free agent quarterbacks that are solely going to be 1-year bridge quarterbacks and really don't offer you like upside for the future.
All right.
Then Jameis probably does fit that. And that's fine. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right. Like that is I think it's a perfectly legitimate strategy for teams this offseason. Like if the Jets can't get a top quarterback, or the Raiders, Seattle's I think a team we haven't really brought up yet, but like Geno Smith's not necessarily like somebody they're committed to, I don't think. But
no.
Teams that need just like 1 year, and then we'll plan on 2026 is our year. We're going to go get one of these young, one of these drafts, quarterbacks, whatever. I think Jameis is a very logical pick. It kind of falls into like it's sort of like the Jacoby Brissett, Drew Lock kind of like realm of quarterbacks where you know what you're going to get from them. You're probably going to win 6-7 games at most.
Maybe.
And that's fine because you're not planning 2025 is not going to be your year, and you can accept that. And frankly, I think teams should kind of do that a little more often because sometimes they kind of fool themselves into trying to be better than they are. But either way, yeah, I think Jameis is a perfectly fine option.
So I like Winston, and I also like to call out to Seattle. So Seattle, to me, is going to address quarterback at least once in the offseason. And that is because they had a new coach last year, but the new coach is with somebody else's quarterback. Yep. So to me, if you're a new coach within your first 2 seasons, you got to get your quarterback in the building. I think that's why Dable is not succeeding at the Giants. He never brought his quarterback in. right? Which is a different story for a different podcast. But ultimately, so Seattle would have to say, okay, we're going to draft a rookie, and they're going to decide like which one they like. Sign a Jameis Winston because you know you can get starting snaps out of him for 1 or 2 years. And then you'll either have a first or a second round quarterback that you have behind Winston. Right. And to me, that would be that's the Jameis Winston plan. If you're signing Winston, you're likely drafting another quarterback or going to one of the other guys in the list. So, Anthony, who would be your next quarterback on the list?
Yeah, it just keeps getting slimmer and slimmer. I do think there are teams out there, and I'm kind of just assuming that this person's going to be cut, but I do think if Aaron Rodgers doesn't retire, which is a very distinct possibility, and he does get cut, I don't see the world he's on the Jets next year. I think it's soured. But if Aaron Rodgers wants to play again, or to keep playing, and the Jets want to just go in a completely different direction, could he potentially do the Russell Wilson strategy of, you do not need the money, right? Like Aaron Rodgers is financially set. He's going to get paid what he's gotten paid from the Jets. If he wants to go to a team that truly is a quarterback away. Now, obviously, there is a lot more that comes with Aaron Rodgers than just the player. You're
Right.
dealing with an enigma of a man. But there is, and Aaron Rodgers certainly has not played his best football this year. I know that firsthand.
Yep.
But I do think there is still an avenue where if you truly believe that you're a playoff team and quarterback is the only thing that's holding you back, Aaron Rodgers could come in and potentially be the person that at least carries you to playoff success, and could also be a guy that helps mentor a young quarterback that you want to bring in and develop. It's, again, there are issues to be had with this plan. I recognize that. But in terms of just pure quarterback talent that we're talking about with free agent and trade candidates, it still does not get much better than Aaron Rodgers, even with the struggles and the issues that he's had with the Jets. I don't think it's helped. The Jets are just a mess, so I don't think it's all Rodgers' fault either. But
as a Bills fan, I was hoping the Jets were going to keep Rodgers.
Yeah,
okay,
I get that.
So no, and that'll let the audience know what I think, right? So I'm just coming in. Here's my bias. Okay, so I can see. I think there's two questions with Rodgers, and I think one is, does he come back? Like, does he retire, come back? I think that's a huge question. But then the second question I would ask is that, will Rodgers go somewhere where he may not be the starter? And here's what I mean. So, like, we just talked about Seattle. So if Geno's under contract, I would love Rodgers in Seattle because they have a strong running game and they have pretty good players there. Right. Like, I have a lot of respect for the guys that they have on offense, even if they're getting up there in age at wide receiver. I still like, JSN and some of the other things that are going on there. So I could see Rodgers to Seattle. I could see, if Stafford is traded, I could see Rodgers being that fill-in for the Rams, right? I could see some things. My big Rodgers landing spot, though, would be at Tennessee. If he comes back, and Brian, you're shaking your head. Okay, so what do you think about Rodgers?
No, he's not going to want to go somewhere like Tennessee, which, I mean, they have some talent, but I don't think there's enough talent there right now. So if he comes back, he's going to want to go to, like, the Rams, what else I have? Like I mentioned earlier, possibly Miami if Tua retires, they cut him or what have you. I think maybe Pittsburgh, but I don't know if he'll fit in with their culture. I think they might just be like, no, we don't want to deal with the circus that comes with him. But I mean, at least there's the roster there that I think if they brought him in, he would help out a lot. He would make a difference, I think, because like I said, they got a decent offensive line. They probably need maybe one more guy, but they got the receivers, they got running backs, so on and so forth, and good defense. So I think he would probably want to go to Pittsburgh.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yep.
Yeah. And like I said, Miami. I think Miami. He'd be a really good fit in Miami with those speed receivers. He just have to chuck it down the field because the thing that doesn't get talked about super loud with Aaron Rodgers is he hates the middle of the field. He does not like throwing over the middle of the field. So he doesn't have to worry about that with those receivers. He just posts and fades and all that. Just throws it deep, chucks it deep, and he's got strong arms still. So that's all he would have to worry about. Only thing he'd have to worry about actually is the offensive line because the offensive line's not that great. But those receivers he do go, and the running back A-Chain and stuff like that. So I think that'd be a good fit. If, again, like I said, if Tua retires or they cut him or trade him or what have you. But yeah, he's going to want to go somewhere where there's talent. I think. Knowing Rodgers, having watched him for 15 years or something, whatever it was, he's not going to want to go out like he did this year. He's going to want to like try and at least, maybe not necessarily win a Super Bowl, but he's going to go out and have a good year and show he's still the man or the guy or he's still a Hall of Famer or whatever. So I think he'll probably give it at least one more year. I think if he has a bad year, maybe he retires, but I think he's going to want to try and go out, quote unquote, on top or what. He's going to have a John Elway moment.
And I mean, Rodgers is going to be significantly better. I'm about to bring up three guys. I think Rodgers is better than the three guys I'm going to bring up next. But my next three, these guys are trade targets, and these are backups. Okay. But I think there's a good chance one or all three move to form a quarterback room. Meaning that, and again, one of the things that you'll hear me talk about a lot on the podcast is when your team doesn't have a great quarterback, you need to build the room, which means that you're trying to find three guys and they may have slightly different pedigrees. So like you might want a guy that's had a few spot starts as a backup with a rookie with another type of veteran, and those three form a room around a rookie. So the three guys I'm going to bring up: Joe Milton, Jake Browning, Tyson Bagent. So Tyson Bagent is the backup in Chicago. I believe he is still on a rookie deal. So I believe you get 1 or 2 more years at cost control. The Bears are happy with Caleb Williams. So this is a guy to me that can be moved. Browning filled in for Joe Burrow last year when he was hurt. And to me, he showed enough that he should get the Rob Johnson treatment. And if you guys look a lot younger than me, but Brian, do you remember Rob Johnson from the Jaguars?
Funny enough, Rob Johnson actually went to my same high school. He's older than me, of course. But yeah, he went to the city. There was pictures of him up on the walls in the weight room because I played football there too. If anybody's curious, it's El Toro High School in Southern California. But yeah, he went to the same high school as me. So yeah, I know exactly who he is.
Yep. Anthony, do you know the name, or is that a little bit before your time?
No, but sounds great. Sounds like a great guy.
So Rob Johnson filled in, I believe, for an injured Mark Brunell for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He filled in for one start. He went like 21 of 25. And then I think he got hurt. So the third string guy had to come in, but Buffalo traded a first-round draft pick for him the next year. But then Johnson got benched for Doug Flutie.
Yep. I remember that too.
So I'm comparing Browning to that. Browning has had more than one start, though. That's the difference. Browning has had more than one start. But I think Browning would help build a room, right? You still want to draft a rookie. You still probably want another guy there because you don't necessarily know what you have. But for him to be sitting behind Burrow, he's never going to get an opportunity. To me, that's a trade candidate. And then Joe Milton played the last game of the season for the Patriots.
Right.
So He was drafted just last year. I believe he was a 6th-round pick.
Yep.
The Patriots were trying to go for a higher draft pick. So that's my opinion as to why they benched May, because May was healthy. They could have played him in the last game, but they chose not to because they were probably tanking for a better draft pick. But yet the Patriots backups beat Buffalo's backups. But I'll definitely tell you, from watching that game against Buffalo's backup defense, I would trade for Joe Milton in a heartbeat. I would probably offer a day 2 pick for him, straight up. Just from watching one game, to me, it's worthy of a day 2 pick. Or you trade a second for Milton in a 4th, or for Milton in a 5th. So you maybe get a pick back, but much later in the draft. I think both New England would take that deal in a heartbeat. And I think that that's a relatively fair deal for the risk and the reward. So, Brian, what do you think of Milton, Browning, or Bagent?
We got thoughts about all three. Milton, coming out of college, that guy, he has a cannon for an arm, but not much else. So I don't think he's in one year in the NFL, he's going to magically become an NFL quarterback. You know what I mean? Like a starting quarterback. He just has accuracy all over the place. There's always all over the place. Everything is a fastball with him. You know, there's no touch. He's a pretty good athlete for his size, but I think he's a career backup. I would not trade anything for that guy. Browning is maybe. I was just looking right now. He started 8 games for Cincinnati last year. And he had a couple decent games. Like he threw like 3 touchdowns against Cleveland, a couple touchdowns against Indy, a couple touchdowns against Minnesota. So a couple decent games. So I think maybe he would be a possibility. Maybe. He didn't play this year. I think. Let me look real quick again. I think he did. Not really. I mean, a couple kneel downs, but that's it. Yeah, he didn't really play any this year, but last year he showed something. So I think he's probably the best option, and he's been in the league for 4 years already. So he's had some time and stuff. So if somebody thinks there's a quarterback out there to trade for, I think he's probably the best option and most realistic option. Because I know in the group at times we've talked about Malik Willis and the Packers, but knowing how the Packers are, they're not going to want to trade him. They're going to want to keep their backup quarterback, even though he has 1 year left on their contract. They're going to want to keep him. I mean, they may draft like a quarterback this year in the 6th, 7th round to see if they can develop on the practice squad type of thing. So I think Browning is probably the best option out there. Bagent, I think he's more of a career backup who can maybe like a spot start type of thing. You know, if your starter gets injured, but I don't think he's the guy you're going to want to trade for to be a starter.
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to my head when you mentioned them was Tennessee trading for Browning. Like that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you have Brian Callahan, who worked with him and got that impressive run of games when he filled in, like that to me makes all the sense in the world. And I was kind of hypothesizing in my head, and truthfully, I don't have a great answer, but would I rather have Jake Browning as my if I'm Tennessee? Would I rather have Jake Browning as my starter and then take, let's just say, probably Abdul Carter first overall, or create a quarterback room with Jake Browning and whoever, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, whoever you like? I feel like I would rather just go into the season with Jake Browning just because I'm not personally high on Ward or Shedeur. You get an elite player like Abdul Carter. And then in 2026, I mean, you know, is Browning going to light the world on fire? Probably not, but potentially maybe he shows he's a competent starter with Callahan. So you have that upside, and then you're also now creating a scenario where in 2026 you bring in a young quarterback. You have a quarterback in Browning who knows the offense and who can be an effective bridge quarterback to then lead to that young player. That's a situation I think Tennessee should look at. I think that makes a lot of sense. As for, I think Badgen is I think Badgen is a career backup. And I don't. It doesn't even mean I hate the idea of him being in a quarterback room with someone with another young guy or whatever. But I'm not as gung ho unless there is a fit in the way that there is with Callahan and Browning. If Badgett has that sort of rapport and an understanding of the offensive system he goes to, then I'm a little more excited. But I Badgett to me never really was that move the needle kind of guy. And then Milton, Brian talked about it. I was also not too high on Milton. I do think he was, for his physical tools, I think he was a little criminally underdrafted, going pick 180 something in the 6th round, just because he did have those physical tools. And obviously he had his struggles reading the field. He had his struggles with just accuracy in general. But if a team wanted to throw out, a mid-round pick for him to bring him in and see what they could get, I wouldn't hate it. Obviously, 1 week 18 game is a tough metric to judge a quarterback on, but considering I thought he should have been a 4th round pick to begin with anyway, I don't hate it. So I wouldn't he's certainly not worth a 1st or 2nd round pick, but 4th round pick to bring in Joe Milton and have him be a guy that can compete with somebody else and give you a little more upside in the quarterback room. Sure, why not?
Cool. So Brian, any other names you want to bring up, or I can start giving a laundry list of names, because I found about 40 names before the podcast.
Yeah, I saw the list. I think he's in your list, but I thought Hendon Hooker's a possibility as a trade candidate, but he hasn't really played much. He's basically not played at all. It's outside obviously preseason, so he could be a possibility because he was, before he got hurt coming out, he was looking like he was going to be maybe like a mid-round early or day 2 pick, then he got hurt and stuff. So because he's got talent, and of course he's playing in that crackerjack offense in Tennessee where you just read half the field, but that Josh Heupel offense. But anyway, so he's potential there, but I think if he gets traded, probably more likely next year, if he gets some playing time this coming year, and then after this coming year, I should say. So next offseason, maybe then.
So let me change the Hooker conversation. If you had to choose between Hooker and any quarterback not named Ward or Sanders, how would you comp where you would have Hooker on your draft board this year, knowing he has 2 years of NFL backup experience? How would you handicap that?
I don't know.
Would you rather have Dart or Hooker? Would you rather have McCord or Hooker? Where would he fall for you, do you think?
Can I say none?
Okay, that's an acceptable answer.
I mean, if you're talking about
draft one, you would rather draft one than trade for Hooker.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about as a starter, I don't know. I wouldn't want to have Dart as a starter as a rookie because I don't think there's still some upside with him. I should say, not super high, but he's going to need some time to adjust to the NFL offense. McCord's got some talent, but who knows? I don't know if he'll ever be a starter. Outside of Ward and Sanders, it's again, like we said with these free agents, it's slim pickings as far as guys with starter upside in this class. So I would just punt to 2026 and maybe grab Al or someone or maybe Arch Manning if he comes out or something like that.
So Anthony, what do you think of Hendon Hooker?
Yeah, Hendon Hooker, he's an interesting conversation. And, I mentioned Ben Johnson before. Ben Johnson, wherever he winds up at this point, could certainly want to bring Hendon Hooker with him. Obviously, there's something that they liked about him. They took him, I think it was 4th round when quarterback was like not a need for them. They still had Goff, and they obviously still have Goff. So yeah, Hendon Hooker is interesting. If we're doing the ranking him on a draft board exercise, I'm probably pretty close to Brian. I mean, maybe, like a late, like a sixth, seventh round pick, sure. Because I do think there is an upside there. But I wouldn't be like stoked about it. I don't think he's really shown you that much. But I do think there is something there. I don't at this, because I think there was an opportunity if he really was a starter potential that he could have given Jared Goff a bit of a run, and Jared Goff has played exceptionally well. But I think there was a time where you could have, if Hendon Hooker really had that much potential, we could have seen a sort of quarterback competition. So at this point, Hendon Hooker just feels like backup at best. And I wouldn't be like that excited to have him as like a potential starter.
Okay, so Anthony, any more that you want to bring up?
Is there any more I want to bring up? I will. I mean, look, it kind of depends on it depends on a lot of things, but do we feel that I'm not even going to say one person. I'm kind of just going to put these guys in a group of sorts, but like the Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance collective, if you will. I think all three of them former first round picks. All three of them, I think, flashed. Some flashed more than others, but there was a reason all three of them were drafted where they were drafted. And in a world where you believe, I think this more applies to, well, I think Zach Wilson had the worst situation of the three. And so if you believe that Zach Wilson truly didn't get a fair shake, now I would push back on that a bit. But it goes back to kind of what we were saying about Justin Fields, where they're still incredibly young. There is still an upside to them. How high that upside is at this point, you can judge that. But, Mac Jones won 10 games in his rookie season. I don't think you do that if there's just no talent whatsoever. Zach Wilson, for all his faults, was dealt an incredibly terrible hand. Trey Lance, I think, is more of a if he ever is going to work, needs an offense catered to his skill set, and I don't think he really got that in San Francisco or now in Dallas. He just feels like a gadget guy. So I think those are three guys that could very likely move. I believe all three of them are free agents this season. So they're all three likely going to land somewhere that they are not at this point. And all three of them still have something, I think. I don't think it's ever going to reach the expectations of where they were each drafted. But again, this conversation now is just trying to fill a quarterback room, I think. I think we're just trying to find people that could be either like a bridge or try to compete with a rookie quarterback or whatever it is. So in that sense, I still think having one of those three guys on your roster could be worthwhile.
So those three guys, again, I'm going to call them out because I absolutely love it, Anthony. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. Okay, so these are guys, going back to you build a room. You're not going to sign them and anoint them the starter, but could you see a team signing a Jameis Winston and then a Mac Jones, a Trey Lance, or a Zach Wilson? So now you have a quarterback room of Winston, one of these 3 former number 1 quarterbacks, and then you draft one. And now you have a room. This is what I mean by you've built a room. You're at least going into training camp knowing you have 2 choices plus your developmental rookie. I think that's a really good call out. If you're grabbing any one of those 3 former first-round quarterbacks. First of all, first-round quarterbacks get a lot of chances. Sam Darnold is on chance number 3 right now. Baker Mayfield, I think, is on chance number 3 right now. Yep. So if you're drafting in the first round, you're going to get more than one choice or more than one chance. But Brian, what do you think of those 3 that Anthony just brought up?
Yeah, I think Trey Lance is basically a bust. I think he got hyped up just because he was playing North Dakota State and he was playing FCS competition, and he barely threw the ball and he would just bomb it down to Christian Watson and stuff like that. So I just don't think he's an NFL quarterback as far as like a starter type of thing. I think again you can use him like Anthony said, like a gadget guy. I think you can use him kind of like I don't forget his name. The guy in New Orleans. It wasn't Green Bay. Taysom Hill. Yeah. I think you can use him like a Taysom Hill type of thing. Zach Wilson, I didn't even like him when he was coming out. I felt like at BYU he was just playing like backyard football. So again, probably backup quarterback for him. And then who's the third guy again? Lance Wilson and
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones, that's right. Mac Jones maybe again as a backup spot starter, maybe you bring him in as competition type of thing. Your starter gets hurt, you throw him in there. He'll win you a game or 2, but maybe like I think if he actually, I don't think about this. If he shows some improvement, at least maybe he could be like a Ryan Fitzpatrick type of quarterback. He'll bounce around the league for like 10 years, and start some games here and there and stuff. He'll be a backup here and there, and I think he can be that type of quarterback.
Okay, I've got a few names that I'd like to drop. So this list is going to be long, but the podcast we're about to finish, and I want to make sure that the names get dropped. So Mitch Trubisky, Joe Flacco, Mason Rudolph, Teddy Bridgewater, Nick Mullins, Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton. A few of those guys are free agents. One of them we're waiting to see if he gets cut. That would be Kirk Cousins. Yeah. Mitch Trubisky has started before, but he's under contract with Buffalo for 1 more year. But Buffalo, ironically, even though they only keep 2 quarterbacks in the 53, extended their third-string quarterback.
Oh, you mean was the third-string guy on the practice squad?
The third-string guy was on the practice squad.
Oh, the signed to a future deal, right?
No, they actually extended him, like a real extension.
Interesting.
And then they for the playoffs, they promoted the third string to the 53 because it gives them some flexibility for a playoff game that they want, that they don't plan to use that flexibility in the regular season, right?
Right.
And I'm already I've already forgotten who the third string quarterback is. But so Buffalo extended him. So I'm curious if a team came calling for Trubisky at the trade deadline. So meaning Brandon Beane knows he has trade value in his backup quarterback, right? Because Trubisky is a former first-round pick. He started 4 years for the Bears. He had a shot to beat out Kenny Pickett and did not, which probably says something about where Trubisky's talent is, exactly. Right? But again, if you're building a room and you want an experienced quarterback in the room, Mitch Trubisky, Joe Flacco, Mason Rudolph, Teddy Bridgewater, Nick Mullins, Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton. Any of those guys kind of fit that description of they've started before. My opinion is you don't bring in any of these guys handing him the starting job, but you bring in any of those 6 guys to compete for the starting job. You'll probably have a rookie, and you might even have 2 of the guys that I just listed. Right, and all 3 of them are now competing for, snaps in the preseason and letting the coaching staff make a decision. But Brian, out of all those guys, anybody stand out?
I think, the guy that I think has the best shot is maybe, having a best shot at being a starter or competing for a certain position, I think probably be Cousins, just because his past and his experience and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty sure from some Atlanta fans that I talked to, and I know that they're saying that he's like almost 100% getting cut. But yeah, I think probably maybe someone signs him and thinks, well, maybe it was just a bad fit in Atlanta. He was coming off the injury. He wasn't himself completely yet. Maybe we can bring him in and be a bridge quarterback for a couple of years, and maybe get us some wins and this and that. So I think I can see a coach or GM talking themselves into that.
What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, it's kind of tough with Cousins at this point because it did just feel like he's just a shell of himself physically at this point. And you saw it when Penix came in. Penix immediately just the arm talent was just clearly so much better, and his ability to push the ball down the field, it just feels like Cousins doesn't have that anymore. Now, that said, obviously the Cleveland connection has been well established with his history with Kevin Stefanski. I think, and I agree. It feels like Cousins is getting cut at this point. I think Miami, a team that, yes, they like the deep ball, and that's a problem. But in terms of, if you can cater an offense to just quick outs and slants and stuff like that, get the ball out to Tyreek and Waddle and Achane and whoever, and that's how you construct the offense. Kirk Cousins knows how to lead that sort of West Coast feel. I think Cousins is. I think there is still something in the tank, but it's definitely not as much as we thought it was this time last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it remains to be seen. But that's kind of the risk you run with all these older, these Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco types. Like, eventually they're going to lose it. Age is undefeated, right? So, that's sort of the risk you run with an older guy that has experience, but the physical limitations are going to catch up. So I probably would agree. Like, Cousins is probably the best, but I wouldn't be like super excited about that either. And he probably also is another one that, like, you would expect him to do the Russell Wilson, cheap 1-year deal thing and just kind of see what you're getting.
I do like the Cousins call out to Miami. Like, that was insightful. Now, here's a couple things, and refresh my memory, because last off season feels like it was more than a year ago. When Cousins went to Atlanta, wasn't it because his wife had ties to Atlanta?
I believe
Maybe.
Yes, I think they had some sort of family
Connection.
something.
So,
I don't remember what it was, but yes, I do think they had ties to Atlanta somehow. Like her family lived there, or like something like that. Yeah.
So the teams that are close to Atlanta would be Carolina, Jacksonville, and then a little bit further down, Tampa Bay and Miami.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily see him go to Tampa. I'm not suggesting that Cousins go to Tampa, but I could see, Miami, like, isn't as far from Atlanta as, let's say, a place like, Dallas isn't going to be signing Kirk Cousins, but
No.
like, I'm thinking of like any team that is west of the Mississippi is further away from Atlanta than Miami.
Like Seattle.
Yeah. So, and again, but that would also be a decision. Does Cousins decide to keep playing? I don't see him retiring, right? I see these guys, like, if he retires, it's going to be during training camp. It's not going to be now. He might go into training camp and then see, ooh, like, I've lost it. But I don't think he retires now. I think he would go into training camp and then say, no, not anymore. I can't think of too many guys that have done that. But there's a part of me that says some of these guys might go into training camp and they'll retire before they get cut. Kind of thing. But
Maybe.
Potentially.
Do either of you have any other names that you'd like to drop? We have We have gone through the gauntlet.
I don't think so. I mean,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So
no. So yeah, sorry. No,
Okay.
just. I mean, I have some other names on the list, but nothing really that I think that's anybody really worth talking about. So I mean,
yeah,
not really.
I have names here, but I'm not passionate about any of them.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of negative about them. So
cool. Well, Brian, you want to tell everybody kind of who you are, how they can find your content?
yeah, of course you can get me here on X, Be Mafia NFL, and then of course I write for Gridiron Heroics. I've been putting out my final rankings for the draft. I do a top 10 for each position, so my top 10 quarterbacks are out, top 10 running backs are out, and top 10 wide receivers are out. So you can see those there at Gridiron Heroics. And then also I do write for the Cheez-It TV Draft Guide. I just heard from the guy who runs it, Al, today, so I'm on it for sure. I usually do a position breakdown. I do how do you say? I do a scouting report. Sorry, for a certain position. Last year I did D-line. This year I might do D-line again, but we'll see. And then I usually write an article for it. And I'm trying to think of anything else. I'm also on Blue Sky, but I'm not down there too much. And of course, you can always find me here on the podcast on Draft Fanatics, and I believe that's about it.
Cool. Anthony.
yeah, you find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. Constantly tweeting out draft opinions and content. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Well, for me, you'll see my content at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It's the same on YouTube and X. This channel has daily draft content. So we have 30 people. So right now you're seeing 3 of the 30 on this podcast. We have 30 people that are pumping out daily draft content. So we'll have a mock draft podcast every Friday and every Sunday. Monday, we're going to have 2 podcasts all the way through Thursday. So Monday through Thursday, there are 2 podcasts. There's usually one at about 7 Eastern, then another one that's usually 9 Eastern. Some days it's 9:15, just depending upon what night of the week it is and which people are doing it. But basically, we have an early and a late podcast, and the topics are going to range through a lot of things. So this week, the late podcast will be the roster construction of one of the Final Four teams. So I believe, and I'm doing this from memory, but Monday is the winner of the Detroit Rams game. What is the DNA of that roster? Tuesday, it's the winner of the Philly Commanders game.
I think the Philly plays the Rams.
Thank you.
And
so
Lions
the Philly Rams is Tuesday. It would be the Detroit Commanders game that's Monday. Wednesday would be the Chiefs-Texans winner. Thursday is going to be the Bills-Ravens winner. And just kind of going through, how did the roster get constructed? What can we try to find trends about the org structure, about they pick these positions early, these positions late. There's this many draft picks on the team. They hand out these types of free agent contracts. We're just going to basically spend an hour on each team. And then Friday next week, we have a group mock draft. So there's going to be 32 of us drafting for 32 different teams. Anthony will have the Jets. Brian is probably going to be messaging in the Packers picks, that kind of thing. So it's, getting into mock draft season, starting to check to see where our boards are and, which players we think different teams will be targeting. So we're going to start those discussions on Friday. And then there's positional breakdowns Monday through Thursday, different position each day. So just a lot of podcast content coming your way. And the YouTube channel has plenty of positional breakdowns already. So you can see Brian and Anthony doing running backs. I know that Brian was doing some offensive line scouting reports. I think Anthony, I don't remember if you did scouting reports. I think you did some of the Senior Bowl guys. So you'll see different people covering different positions. And if there's more content that you want to see, all you have to do is ask. Like I said, daily draft content. So like, follow, subscribe on YouTube and X. So on behalf of all 30 people at the Draft Professor, for Anthony, for Brian, for myself, thank you very much for watching, and have a good Saturday, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on X at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. Please follow the Draft Professor channel on YouTube at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. We look forward to seeing you on our podcast tomorrow.